welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 514 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm going to ask you to agree with me. I'm going to ask you to hear me out. I'm not going to lie to you. I never thought I would start an episode with a Norman Powell trade. Now, that's no offense to Norman Powell. That's no offense to the Clippers. There's no offense to the Heat. But I just never thought I'd start an episode with a Norman Powell trade. But this Norman Powell trade not only is massive for the Miami Heat, but it's also massive for the LA Clippers, and it kind of shows the direction that they're going in. Norman Powell had not historic, but he had his best season last year. A lot of people argue that he should have been an All-Star. I'm one of those people, especially when you see what happened with LeBron James. Norman Powell was a cog in a machine that was the LA Clippers that, especially towards the end of the year, you can say competed for and was in the running for a championship. And on a natural day, Norman Powell getting traded wouldn't really move the needle. But the reason why I'm starting this episode with that is because not only does this spell big change for the Clippers, it also shows you which direction they're going and moving forward without essentially telling you what they're doing. This move, surprisingly, is centered around Bradley Beal. I think I have to set some things straight real quick. No, Bradley Beal didn't have the greatest of seasons last year with the Phoenix Suns. But Bradley Beal didn't have a bad season. I talk about this a lot, man. Once you get a big contract, and it also goes back to expectation. Once you get a big contract and you have expectations not only attached to that contract, but attached to the team that you're going to or you're on, your play is going to be put under a microscope more than anything. And the fact that Bradley Beal and the Phoenix Suns had huge hopes, even though I told people from the beginning, I don't consider, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker an essential big three because they all do the same things. Not one of them highlights what another one doesn't do. So you just have three players that essentially play the same exact role. Obviously, one or two is better than the other, but still. But in the grand scheme of things, Bradley Beal didn't have a terrible season as a player. But when you attach the contract and when you attach the fact that there was high hopes for the Phoenix Suns, that's when you can say, all right, Bradley Beal didn't have the greatest of seasons. I think it's about role. If you play your role and the team has the perfect role for you, I think Bradley Beal can still flourish. And the trade of Norman Powell is not only just the fact that Norman Powell was traded, but his contract was traded and his importance to in offense. Because don't get me wrong, I know that James Harden was important and Kawhi Leonard was important, but Norman Powell was uber important to that Clippers offense last year. Hence why a lot of people say that he should be an All-Star. But this trade, obviously it was a three-team trade. It was the Heat, it was the Jazz, and it was the Clippers. The Heat, I know the Jazz got Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson. They're probably going to get waived. So I don't know what's in store for them moving forward. But what this shows is two teams that are moving in two different directions in a sense of almost every single time since Bradley Beal was in Washington, almost every single time you heard about Bradley Beal and a move for Bradley Beal, the one destination that constantly came up was the Miami Heat. And understandably so, even at the time, Miami did look like a perfect destination for Bradley Beal. And even now, obviously, we're talking about it because of the Norman Powell trade, but before the trade, it still looked like a perfect piece. Even though I don't think that makes them a championship caliber team. I don't think Norman Powell makes them a championship caliber team, but it is a good spot because Bradley Beal would take the reins as essentially the best player. You can say it's Tyler Hero, you can say it's Bam. I think at each person's point of their career, again, I understand that Bradley Beal was looked at a little differently because of his contract and because of the year he had with that contract. But I still think Bradley Beal is good enough to be the best player on a team. I'm not saying that team is a championship caliber team, but we have seen Bradley Beal be the best player. But this Norman Powell trade changes that. Bradley Beal has all, and I literally mean all, the power in this situation because of that no trade clause. I know Washington was the one that gave it to him, but again, I think that there is a select few people in sports in general that deserve a no trade clause. Now, I would like everyone. Let me back up. I would like everyone to get a no trade clause because that essentially means that you have the final say so of where a team trades you. Obviously, that is unrealistic, but if that were the case, that would be great, but it's not. And because it's not, it gives certain players like, do you know the only two people that comes to mind right now that has a no trade clause in the NBA is LeBron James. I think, three people. LeBron James, I believe Nikola Jokic, and Bradley Beal. Now, there may be more, but those are the three that I can think of on the top of my head. That means Bradley Beal is in that class, which is crazy. But Bradley Beal has all the leverage because of that no trade clause. You can say, hey, Brad, we want to send you to here, and he can be like, nah. That's kind of why KD was traded. Bradley Beal's no trade clause is why Kevin Durant was traded. I know that, it was reports that Phoenix didn't want him, but the only reason why Phoenix didn't want to keep that Kevin Durant is because of money and because the fact of we're going to talk about that second apron a little bit later in the show, but that second apron is a killer. And when you have essentially three players that make up 85% of your payroll and your roster, that's not going to bode well for a team, especially a team that gets swept in the first round of the playoffs. But I say all this to say, the Heat trading for Norman Powell essentially takes them out of the Bradley Beal conversation. One thing that we have not really been able to say, even with Bradley Beal coming or going to Phoenix, there was a sense that if this doesn't work out, the number one destination would be Miami. Well, you getting Norman Powell, and especially the contract that's attached to Norman Powell, the Heat are essentially out. And I know the Clippers got John Collins in that deal, but he doesn't cost nearly as much as Norman Powell cost. Which brings me to the Clippers. One thing that we know is there are always deals. I'm not going to call them under the table deals, but the NBA, sports in general, whatever league you're in, is a fraternity. Meaning each team talks to another team, even if they're not supposed to. And you can call it tampering, but this Norman Powell trade is it's almost like a green reflecting light saying, "Oh no, we know that we're getting Bradley Beal." Bradley Beal has been in contract talks, working out a buyout with the Suns, meaning he's probably going to be a free agent soon, and it's no coincidence that now you're hearing the number one destination for Bradley Beal could be the Clippers. And my question is, does this make the Clippers an essential championship caliber team? It's very unfortunate for the Clippers that they're not in the East right now, because I would for sure say yes if they were in the East. But this can be considered. I'm not saying it's instantly going to make them a better team than, I don't know, the Thunder or the Heat right now. Or not the Heat, or the Rockets right now. But this is the definition of a big three: James Harden, Bradley Beal, Kawhi Leonard. Because each player, as great as they are, do things exceptional that the other player may not do. James Harden when it comes to his assists. Kawhi Leonard when it comes to his defense. And Bradley Beal when it comes essentially to just his pure scoring. I'm very interested to see. Now, obviously, this is all speculation, and it may or may not happen. But when you trade someone like Norman Powell, who was your essentially second or third best player when you look at the totality of the season, and just so happens that his contract and the space that it leaves fits someone like Bradley Beal perfectly, the writing's on the wall, So I think Norman Powell will be great in Miami. Again, I definitely don't think this makes them a championship caliber team. And you can argue if Miami is a better situation for Norman Powell than the Clippers, because Norman Powell is a player that needs the ball in his hand and that thrives when the offense is centered on him. I don't know if that's going to be the case, obviously, when you have Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo and Andrew Wiggins, but I do think that Norman Powell thrived when he was on the court and James Harden was not. And that's no offense to Powell or James Harden, but Norman Powell is one of those players that he needs to be the one that has the ball in his hand for him to play at his best. Or when one of the big two was out, meaning if Norman Powell was on the floor with James Harden but Kawhi Leonard was out, Norman Powell would thrive. If Kawhi Leonard was in the game and not James Harden, Norman Powell would thrive. He's not, even though he's the third best player, essentially, or was the third best player on that team, he thrived when he had more offensive, a bigger offensive workload. So I'm excited to see what happens. And again, the reason why I started this episode with this is because this essentially means Bradley Beal, whenever he gets the buyout secure, he's going to the Clippers. If something changes, we'll talk about it, but that's essentially what that means. So I talked about how important free agency is. And I talked about how this is essentially like the second season for the NBA, because I was talking, the draft, I think the first season, the second season is pretty much free agency. This is where you can really cement yourself as either a contender or somebody that is planning for the future, essentially a rebuild. And every single team, whether a large move like the Houston Rockets getting Kevin Durant, or a smaller move like the Wizards trading for CJ McCollum, every single team has made a free agent move outside of one: the Golden State Warriors. As we record this, the Golden State Warriors has not made one free agency move. Now, yes, they lost a long-time Warrior Kevon Looney to the Pelicans, which I, this I, this is a side note. Again, what are the Pelicans doing? It just doesn't make sense. But let's get back to it. The Golden State Warriors lose Kevon Looney to free agency, but they haven't done anything free agency-wise. And you also hear reports that if there is going to be a Kuminga sign and trade, which it looks like more than likely there will be one, that's probably going to take a while. This means essentially two things. One, whether you believe it or not, Golden State believes that their team that they have is good enough to compete. When you have a healthy Steph Curry, when you have a healthy Jimmy Butler, when you have a healthy Draymond Green, and you have people like Brzezinski, you have Poe, like this team, the higher ups on this team believe that they're good enough. And you've heard it. Steve Kerr has praised this team, talking about it's the deepest team that he's ever coached. Okay. I do understand, like, it could, but that is also contingent on having someone like Jonathan Kuminga. But they think that they're good enough to compete. I mean, you can paint it up as this team was essentially a Steph Curry injury away from making it to the Western Conference Finals last year. Now, I don't know if they would have been able to do something against the Thunder, but you know, it's always going to play that what-if game. It also spells this is the difficulty when, and again, this whole episode is going to be essentially littered with the second apron. Golden State was always, in fact, Golden State is one of the primary reasons why there is now a second apron. And Draymond Green even talked about it, how detrimental the second apron is. And essentially, the second apron is why we may or may not see dynasties anymore. Golden State had just a propensity to say, F the salary cap, we'll pay because we're Golden State, because you being here like a Andre Iguodala, like a Kevin Durant, you being here essentially means that we're a championship caliber team. And with the core of Steph, Clay, Dre, and Andre Iguodala, they won 4 championships. Now, yes, with Kevin Durant, they won 2, but 2000, they won 2 without Kevin Durant. But Golden State was religious on, we don't care how much it is. We don't care how much we have to pay in luxury tax. We don't care how much we have to pay over the cap. If we have these players, we are contending. And if we contend, we're going to make our money back tenfold because, a championship brings revenue. A championship brings eyes. It brings new fans. So we don't really care how much we have to pay. And because we're Golden State, because we have someone like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Kevin Durant, we have the popularity. We have the money to spend. In fact, Golden State has money to spend when a team like maybe Washington or a team like Milwaukee at the time just didn't have the resources. So even though I think the second apron is the dumbest decision that the PA has Players Association has ever done, I understand that Golden State was a prime reason why it happened. Which goes back to fans like, and you can tell by the viewership, fans love dynasties. They love dominance. That doesn't necessarily mean leagues and organizations do, especially when you have one team that essentially has a competitive advantage against another team due to money. But trust and believe, Golden State is a prime reason why the second apron even exists. And Golden State, Joe Lacob in that organization has always been like, oh, we'll pay whatever we have to because we have Steph. That window, when you have a player, when you have a superstar, that championship window is essentially riding on their talent. But because of that, they're not able to sign players that they want. They have to, GMs and owners have to be creative about that salary cap. Obviously, moves can be made in the regular season before the trade deadline. You're hearing people like D'Anthony Milton can possibly go back to Golden State. You're hearing Al Horford is a prime player, but you're essentially seeing the ramifications of the second apron in real time on the other side. And again, we'll talk about the second apron a little bit later, but this whole episode is essentially sprinkled around that. Injuries, I think, allow you to lie to yourself. In the sense of, do I think Golden State was good last year, especially after they acquired Jimmy Butler? Yes. Do I think that they were one of the better teams in the West? Yes. But do I think that this team was a championship caliber team? No. And I also don't think that this team was good enough to not make any free agency moves. But again, when you look at it, who are they getting? What free agents were they getting? What free agents are they getting? Yeah, they may be in running to get someone like Bradley Beal, but do you think Bradley Beal really do you think Bradley Beal is coming here, especially when we just talked about him with the Clippers? I don't think so. So unless you trade for somebody, which they don't really have the assets to trade, who are you getting? You also have to look at the landscape of free agency. I don't think that as much as you would want a team like the Golden State Warriors to make a trade, who is out there that's going to change their fortune that they actually had an opportunity to get? I don't know. But I do a lot of this is also Steve Kerr and the front office believe that this is a championship caliber team. I mean, you lost Kevon Looney. You're probably going to lose Gary Payton the second. I don't know where that championship caliber team is, but I also get it because you're riding Steph Curry as long as you can, essentially, which is smart. I mean, Steph Curry was still a superstar last year, still I believe top 10 player. It was just the hamstring that really did him in. So, but we'll see. Again, there's a couple players that are linked to Golden State that hasn't moved yet in free agency. And on top of that, see what happens with the Jonathan Kuminga situation. I essentially think that they're better with Jonathan Kuminga. They just need to find out how to use him. But I think the writing is kind of on the wall with him and the team essentially not being on the same page. So I think we're looking more and more as he's leaving or sign and trade. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, man, that second apron is a beast. Speaking of beast, let's switch gears for a little bit. I want to congratulate Mexico for winning the Gold Cup against the USA team. They beat them 2-1. In no way, shape, or form is the men's soccer team considered a powerhouse when we talk about the grand scheme of soccer or football, whatever you want to call it. The United States dominates in a lot of things sports-wise. Basketball, even though the world is catching up, but basketball, football, even though I don't think there's outside of Canada, there's not really anywhere else that plays football. Women's soccer or women's football. But men, nah. But one thing that the men had was the CONCACAF or the Gold Cup, which is essentially this region's FIBA championship. And for a good minute, the United States was the premier team in the Gold Cup, except for these last 2 years. These last 2 years, Mexico has essentially dethroned the United States when we talk about winning a championship because they beat them for the second straight year. I think when you look at that, if you looked at the match, there are some things some positives you can take for Team USA, seeing as though they were uber aggressive the entire game. And the fact that if it really wasn't for a late goal from Mexico, Team USA was in prime position to win that. And on top of that, there was a hand, dude from Mexico put his whole hand on the ball, and it wasn't called. And I think that kind of took Team USA out of mentally. It took them out. The coach was kind of going crazy because again, it was a clear handball. It's just like, oh, they're not gonna. And then on top of that, Mexico scored, I think, shortly after that. Maybe even on that same play. So there are some positives to take out of your Team USA, and you lost again to Mexico in the Gold Cup. But you still lost. You know, you still were you didn't win the day. And this is now the second year in a row that you lost to Mexico. Essentially the same way. When you see teams like, Argentina, Brazil, Germany, it's far-fetched to expect Team USA to compete with those teams. We're just being honest here. In fact, I'm not saying it was solely because of Team USA, but one of the reasons why the Gold Cup or CONCACAF was essentially created was because those teams, like the Argentinas, the Brazils, the Germanys, the Switzerland, like they were dominating FIBA. And to a certain extent, or the World Cup, to a certain extent, they still dominate the World Cup. And that's understandable. It's like one day you might have to go against Cristiano Ronaldo in Portugal, and then the next day you have to go up against Neymar in Brazil, and then you can arguably see Lionel Messi in Argentina in the final, or go up against the powerhouse that is Germany. Like teams on this side of the globe didn't really have the Team USAs, the Mexicos. They didn't really have a shot on the men's side when we talk about the World Cup. So to, I guess, create some type of enjoyment, some type of parity, they created the CONCACAF. They created the Gold Cup. I can be completely off with my history, but that's kind of what it feels like. And I say all that to say, while, yes, you can take some positives out of this, Team USA is supposed to win this because when you look at the teams that were in it, Team USA should be clear-cut favorites for the second year in a row, might I add. But this is also the second year in a row where they lost. Again, congratulations to Mexico. But Team USA should win. And while you can quote unquote take positives away from it, at the end of the day you still lost. Lost a essentially or lost a cup that essentially was catered for Team USA to win, if we're being completely honest. This is the second year in a row. And again, congratulations to Mexico for beating Team USA in the Gold Cup 2-1. So I want to talk about the WNBA and All-Star for a second. First and foremost, congratulations to everyone that is an All-Star. Congratulations to Caitlin Clark and Nafisa Collier for being captains. It sucks that someone like Brittany Sykes off Washington was snubbed, I believe, because she is Washington's best player. And when you have two players from Washington that made an All-Star, which I think that Sanana Citron and Kiki, I believe that they deserve to be All-Stars. And shout out to them. But I also think Brittany Sykes, especially, and I get it. It's an indie. You have three players, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and Caitlin Clark I get it. But, and I didn't talk about this last episode, even though I probably should have, but I kind of want to talk about this whole Caitlin Clark thing. People are calling the haters, because essentially Caitlin Clark was like number one in the fan vote, obviously. She was number 3, I think, in the coaches poll, and she was 9th in players. Now, shout out to Jamel Hill. She pretty much explained there's no way that you could be 9th with the players. What it is each player has to pick 4 guards, and where she landed after all the players and all the votes were compiled, she landed at 9th. And people are calling the players haters and, this, that, and the third. I'm going to be honest with you. 2 things are extremely true in this situation. Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA. Point blank, period. She is the most recognizable, and she is the most popular player in the WNBA right now. And I don't even think it's remotely close. I'm not saying she's the best. Obviously, I still pick Asia Wilson over her, and Nafisa Collier. Like, she's not the best. I don't think she's close to the best, but she is the most popular. But in the same breath, and when I said 2 things can be true, the second thing is she's also having a terrible year. She's missed half the games due to injury, and the games that she has played, she ain't really been great. So if I'm the players, like, all right, who should I pick? Someone that hasn't played most of the games, or someone like, I don't know, someone like Sabrina Descu, who's an essential part for the New York Liberty, or someone like, I don't know, Alyssa Gray, an important part for the Atlanta. I look at it like this. I don't think they're hating. It's just she's already a captain. Why don't you just vote someone else in? But the teams were announced, and you have obviously Team Caitlin Clark or Team Clark, and you have Team Nafisa Collier. Caitlin Clark's team is obviously Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Sabrina Descu, Asia Wilson, Satu Sabali, Kelsey Mitchell, and the reserves were also picked. You have Gabby Williams, Sayana Citron, Kiki. And no offense to Kiki, there's a reason why I don't even try with her last name, because I don't want to butcher it. So I know how to say Kiki. You have Jackie Young, and you have Kayla Thornton. Shout out to Kayla Thornton from I think she was undrafted 1, and she is on the Golden State Valkyrie. Nafisa Collier's team is obviously Nafisa Collier, Breonna Stewart, Alyssa Gray, Nneka Abumake, Paige Beckards, Courtney Williams. She also has Skylar Diggins, Angel Reese, Elisa Thomas, Kelsey Plum, and Ryan Howard. When you look at both of these teams, I think from the starter standpoint, I think Team Caitlin Clark has it all the way. When you have, obviously, Caitlin Clark, Boston, you have the best player, arguably, in basketball in LA. Well, I really don't think it's an argument right now. A'ja Wilson, even though A'ja Wilson did go down with like a wrist injury with the Liberty, so we don't know what happens there. Sabali and Nadescu, even though, damn, now that I think about it, I don't know, because Nafisa Collier, she's probably the leading candidate for MVP. Breonna Stewart, But when we talk about the reserves, Nafisa Collier's team kind of blows out the water with Skylar Diggins, who's having a great season for the Storm. Angel Reese, who at the beginning of the year, she wasn't playing well at all, but she's picked it up. I think she's has like 5 or 6 straight games with 15 rebounds. Shout out to her. Alyssa Thomas. You know what's crazy? Most of these players are going to be future Hall of Famers, which goes back to what I say a lot, and this is the golden age of sports. But Nafisa Collier, Breonna Stewart, Nneka Abumake, Skylar Diggins, Alyssa Thomas, A'ja Wilson. And depending on, how their careers go, probably Caitlin, Aaliyah, Sabrina, Satu. It's crazy. I think that the All-Star game is going to be great. It's going to be exciting. I think last year was the one where they played Team USA against the All-Star. Maybe it was the year before. But I think it's going to be great. I'm probably going to pick Team Collier. I know Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson on the same team is crazy, and I don't want to pick against Washington Mystics, but I just think Team Collier has a better, maybe more experienced team. Now, I know it's still for the fans, so I'm not just sitting here like, oh, they're gonna be great. No, I think it's gonna be great. I don't think it's gonna be too competitive. That A'ja Wilson injury, if it is serious, is going to change a lot of things, not just for the All-Star, but for the Vegas Aces, who I think is below 500 right now. But, yeah, I'm excited. Let's move forward. Let's get back to basketball, and let's get back to the whole second apron discussion. Paolo Banchero essentially signs a 5-year extension, $238 million, but it is eligible to go up to $289 million if he's eligible for the Supermax, which I think he has to make an All-NBA team or something or win one of the major awards. But especially when you look at the East and especially when you look at how good Paolo has become, he probably will make an All-NBA team, or at least one of the either all defense, you know what I mean? The Magic have made moves this offseason, that you can point to and say, oh, they're trying to win now. I think a lot of teams, especially in the East, are in that win now mode. When you see some of the top dogs like Jason Tatum, like a Tyrese Halliburton, when you see them go down, it's pretty much an arms race for who is going to pick up the mantle. This kind of reminds me, to a lesser extent, of when Michael Jordan retired. the first time. And there was a 2-year stretch where the NBA, just how great Michael Jordan is, the NBA was wide open. Now, those 2 years, the Houston Rockets with Akeem Olajuwon won the championship. But you saw an arms race. You saw, okay, this is our time. The big bad Michael Jordan, he's out. This is our time to capture, everyone felt like they had pretty much equal footing. Now, I don't know essentially how true that is when you talk about the West, because I think you may have a good shot of making it to a championship if you're in the East, but I don't know. I think the championship is going to remain with the West for a good little minute. When you look at the Rockets, the Thunder, we can see what the Denver Nuggets are doing with the moves that they made. I don't know. But the question that arose was: has Paolo Banchero played himself or played well enough to earn this contract? Now, in layman's terms, like the easy way of saying, obviously, because they gave him the contract. But this move and the move we're going to talk about next all has to do with the second apron. Shout out to Paolo Banchero for getting his money. I think Paolo Banchero is, because he plays in the Magic and they haven't really been on TV or showcased, a lot of people don't understand how good he is as a player. I do think that there are still limitations to his game, but Paolo is far and away the best player on the Magic, and I think that they have a much better shot of at least making a championship with him than without him. And I think that he deserved his money and deserved the extension because he's just been that good. Which is crazy because we knew coming out of Duke, we knew when he came out of college that he had the potential, he had the body frame to be good, but we didn't know that he was going to be this good this early on. I don't think that how the Magic are right now, I wouldn't pick them up again. I wouldn't pick them over maybe the Cavaliers. I wouldn't pick them over maybe the New York Knicks because they did just get Mike Brown. Shout out to Mike Brown. So they have a head coach, but we'll see what they look like, with Mike Brown. But as we're seeing, these teams are an injury away. One injury can derail a team, i.e., the Milwaukee Bucks, i.e., the Boston Celtics. But it's very important for teams to sign players now because it gives them, it says 5-year deal, but it gives them essentially a 3 to 4 year window before they have to make some tough decisions, especially when you see the contract that they have to pay now to Desmond Bane. And then you still have Franz Wagner. This is for sure a win-now move. And you're seeing a lot of those win-now moves because, again, the injuries that have affected the West or the East. And I think Paolo Banchero more than deserves this. Again, I don't think just because I don't think you're a championship caliber team, or just because I don't think that, you being the best player on the team essentially spells championship. I don't think Paolo's a superstar, but I do think that he's good. He's the best player on the Magic, and he's had a great career. And I think that he has earned that money. But you're seeing, I don't know if you noticed, but you're seeing a lot of people sign their contract extensions this year, like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like a Paolo Banchero. That is because teams are being smart. and teams understand, yo, this second apron is going to kill us. Let's get in front of it, or let's push it back. And you're seeing Paolo Banchero as one of essentially the Magic understanding. All right, we got to pay Paolo, we have to pay Desmond, we have to pay Franz. Let's push back those uncomfortable conversations for maybe 3 to 4 years. Again, I agree with what Draymond Green said about the whole dynasty things to a certain extent. And it kind of brings me to the next topic, and that is Chet Holmgren signing a 5-year, $250 million extension. I think you have to ask yourself, what do you categorize, or what is categorized as a dynasty? I don't think winning 2 or back-to-back championships makes you a dynasty yet. But if you win 3 straight, obviously, since there's not many teams that have won 3 straight. Or if you, like Golden State, win 4 in 8 years, yeah. You've won 50%. In 8 years, you've won 50% of the championships. That's dynasty status. When Draymond Green was talking about the second apron and talking about how the second apron essentially killed dynasties, gone are the days where you can harbor talent for long stretches of time, because you're going to have to pay them. And there are such steep penalties for being over the luxury, or being over, the second apron, which again, I still think is the dumbest thing that the NBA PA has agreed to, but we're here. And when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander got his contract extension, I said that was a dynasty move. And I said the next domino, the next 2 dominoes, I'm sorry, I'm seeing if we're, okay. The next 2 dominoes was Chet Holmgren and J-Dub. If you get them to sign their extension this year, that means you can push that second apron conversation back maybe 3 or 4 years. Well, you got 2 of the dominoes. I think the hardest one is going to be J-Dub. And I think that's because when you look at the landscape of the league, and that's no offense to him at all, when you look at the landscape of the league, I don't know if J-Dub is going to land on an all-NBA team or all-defensive team again. Especially when, maybe Kawhi Leonard plays enough games, or maybe Luka Doncic plays enough games, or maybe Joel Embiid plays enough games, or maybe Paul George plays enough games, or maybe we'll see about, there's a lot of maybes and ifs that could prevent him from being on an NBA team. And because he landed on an all NBA and all defensive team, I think he's eligible for the Supermax. If he gets the Supermax, that just completely takes the Thunder's chances out of, it just blows them out the water. I talked about that with Shai. I said dynasties can't just happen on the backs of ownership. The players have to want it. You have to be willing to sacrifice some type of financial compensation to get the ultimate prize. Now, do I think it's smart? That's up to the person making that decision. But Chet Holmgren's like, okay, cool. Now you have Shai locked up for 5 years. You have Chet locked up for 5 years. If you get J-Dub, that means that your 3 best players are locked up for like the next 5 years, but it's not really 5 years, because once you get to the end of that contract, it's going to get extremely expensive, and you're going to have to make some decisions, like the Boston Celtics. Trust and believe, if the Boston Celtics, if Jason Tatum didn't get hurt, and they ultimately went to the championship and won back-to-back, none, maybe 1 or 2 of the players, but really I don't think any of them would have left. Or because look at the cards now that the Boston Celtics were dealt. They were facing well, let me say this. Before Jason Tatum's injury, they were looked at as one of, if not the best teams in basketball. They just won a championship. They're trying to that they could have won a second one. So let's look at a alternative universe where Jason Tatum doesn't get hurt. They win 2 championships. Now, while yes, Jason Tatum is still expensive, Drew Holiday is still expensive, Jaylen Brown is still expensive, Kristaps Porzingis is still expensive, all these Derek White is still expensive. All these players are expensive, but they're 2-time champions, and these penalties really don't hit until after next year. So you go into the offseason healthy, winning 2 championships. Then you go next year, a 2-time championship core, and you can compete for a third one. Imagine if they would have won a third one. Then you look, then decisions would have had to be made. But those decisions are a little easier when you're a 3-time champion, or when you just three-peated. Obviously, these are hypotheticals. Now, let's get back to this universe and look at what we're dealt with. Jason Tatum gets hurt. You didn't win a championship. Now you're probably losing Jason Tatum for all of next year, meaning you're just an expensive team that's not, while yes, Jaylen Brown is good, you're not in position to compete for a championship, because even if the Celtics were to make it without making the Drew Holiday move, without making the Kristaps Porzingis move, I don't see them beating, again, the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Thunder. I really don't see them beating the Golden State Warriors if that happened. You know what I'm saying? So injuries play a huge part, and it really emphasizes that second apron, because if they would have won the time, and they could have won next year, the time they would have really had to make decisions about that second apron would have been 2 years from now, and they could have three-peated, or at least won 2 of 3 championships. That's a much different conversation than, okay, you won 1, your best player's out for the playoffs and out for next year, and you're just an expensive team that's not good enough to compete. I said all that to say, these are smart moves that the Magic and Paolo Banchero are making, and the Oklahoma City Thunder are making. They do not. It's probably 3 to 4 years that you don't have to worry about the apron. And on top of that, if you sign J-Dub, your 3 best players that just win you a championship, you also sign Jalen Williams, the one that comes off the bench, you sign him to a contract extension. So it's like, once you have this conversation, if you're 2 or 3 championships in, then you can start making decisions, you know? So I get it. Makes sense. Shout out to Paolo Banchero for getting his contract extension. Shout out for Chet Holmgren for getting his contract extension. Very smart and very much well-deserved. You know, shout out to them. Lastly, before we go, we have the unpopular topic of the day, and it comes solely from Twitter, TikTok. I think the podcast is called The Player's Choice, and they had a conversation about Kevin Durant. And the conversation was centered around Kevin Durant and Nikola Jokic. And one of them, I don't remember the guy's name, but one of them presented a question saying, was Kevin Durant ever on the same level offensively in his career than Nikola Jokic? Or a better way of phrasing that question is, when it's all said and done, is Nikola Jokic a better offensive player than Kevin Durant? And shockingly, it seems like the entire panel, the entire podcast was saying Kevin Durant is nowhere close to Nikola Jokic offensively. Now, it could have been rage bait. It could have been clickbait. I know Kevin Durant saw it, and he was scheduled to go on that podcast, but I think the Houston Rockets trade went through the day it was supposed to happen, so they postponed it. And again, I could be wrong, but I believe the podcast is called Player's Choice. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I think it's called Player's Choice. And everyone is entitled to their opinion. You know, I'm not saying that their opinion is wrong. I'm just giving my opinion on the topic that they brought up. I want to give credit to Nikola Jokic. I think Nikola Jokic is the greatest offensive center we've ever seen. For the longest, I said that the greatest offensive center we've ever seen was Akeem Olajuwon. Just his offensive touch, to me, was unmatched when it comes to centers. But the vision that Nikola Jokic has, his assist ability, his scoring ability, even though he doesn't showcase his scoring ability as much because he's getting everybody else involved, Nikola Jokic is one of the best scoring centers we've ever seen, on top of the fact that he can distribute the ball better than a lot of all-time guards. Now, I'm not saying that he's the greatest center. I mean, I know Shaq was the most unstoppable player of all time. I'm not saying that, but I will stand on the fact that I believe Nikola Jokic is the most offensively gifted center ever. With that being said, I have said it on this podcast, I believe. I've said it on other podcasts. I've said it to anybody that wants to hear me talk. I believe Kevin Durant is the greatest offensive weapon we have ever seen in the league. I'll say it again. Kevin Durant is the greatest offensive weapon we have ever seen in the league. I will go down in saying that Kevin Durant is the greatest offensive player we've ever seen. I know a lot of people throw out Kobe, and that's understandable. But I think that Kobe, who is an offensive savant, don't get me wrong, I think what Kobe has over Kevin Durant is, I think Kobe's the greatest tough shot maker. Like with Kobe, there's been so many, when you look at his highlights, when you look at the span of his career, I look at it as, damn, do you know how many times I look at how the hell did Kobe make that? Or first of all, why did Kobe even attempt that? And on top of that, how did he make that? It's Kobe, man. That's Kobe. The reason why I would pick Kevin Durant over Kobe Bryant when it comes to offensive weapon is because of his height. I know it says 6'11", but when you look at him standing next to a 7-footer, he's pretty much 7 feet. So you have a 7-foot player that moves, that dribbles, that shoots with the consistency of Kevin Durant. We talked about this, I think, last episode. Kevin Durant, for a career, is essentially a couple percentage points off for having a career total of, or a 50, 40, 90 career. That's unheard of. Especially when you look at, especially when you look at the fact of this man is shooting for a career 50, 39, and 82. Again, 50, 39, and 82. Do you see how close he is to 50, 40, 90? And this is someone that also takes essentially 5 3-pointers a game for his career. In fact, the lowest free throw percentage he's ever had is 83.3. And that was 2022, 2023 with the Suns. His lowest field goal percentage was his rookie year at 43%. The highest he's ever had is 57%. And that was with the Sun. Look. This is absolutely no disrespect to Nikola Jokic. I think Nikola Jokic, again, is the best offensive center we've ever seen. I think that Nikola Jokic, even in the little time that he's, well, not little, but even in the time, I think he's been 10 or 11 seasons, even in the time that he's played, I think Nikola Jokic has easily cemented himself as a top 20, top 15 player in the league, ever. But I have to strongly disagree in saying that he's a better offensive weapon than Kevin Durant. And again, this is also no disrespect to Kobe Bryant either. I think Kobe Bryant is the greatest tough shot maker ever and one of the best. I have him top 3 offensive weapons we've ever seen. But when you factor in his height and factor in his consistency, I think Kevin Durant is the greatest offensive player we've ever seen. Now, that's no offense to LeBron. I know LeBron James has the most scoring, but when we talk about being an offensive savant, someone that is just his whole being is offense, I think Kevin Durant is leaps and bounds. I will say this. Nikola Jokic obviously is a better passer than Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant's career assist is 4.4. Nikola Jokic's career assist is 7.2. And rebounds, obviously, since he's a center, he's better than Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic's career is 10.9 rebounds, while Kevin Durant, I believe, is like 7 rebounds. So, passing or assist and rebounds, obviously, I would give to Nikola Jokic, and that is a shout out to Nikola Jokic for being a better assist player than Kevin Durant, and he's a center. But everything else, I'm giving to Kevin Durant, hands down. So again, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. Shout out to all the people on Players' Choice. Shout out to their opinions. But I think Kevin Durant is the greatest offensive weapon we've ever seen. Honestly. And there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the links in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate all you guys. If you like the content, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. Please, please, I'm trying to grow, and I can't do it without you guys. So, again, please follow, please subscribe. Also, for the DSPs, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, same thing. I'm trying to grow the podcast as much as I can, and I cannot do it without you guys. So please, please subscribe, please follow, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. If you know that they'll like the content and they may not know, please share. Please, please, please. It means a lot. For my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, please follow. I post pretty much daily. That's probably the quickest way to get to me. If you keep it respectful, I don't mind going back and forth. It just means that you're listening to me and you have an opinion about something. Both are uber important to me. Again, keep it respectful. I don't mind going back and forth. Just leave a comment and we'll talk about it. Until next time, much love.